I want to ask a question. What kind of writer are you? Or creative or artist or whatever. George R.R. Martin, you might know him from Game of Thrones, aka A Song of Ice and Fire, very well-known fantasy author, very accomplished, done a lot of cool stuff. He popularized this idea that like all writers, sorry also too if I'm butchering it, I don't know, maybe he got it from somewhere else, who knows, but he was the one who came to mind. You know, whenever you think about this idea, he's the one that always kind of pops into my head. But this idea of like, if you were a writer, you were more than likely one of two types of writers. You're either an architect or you're a gardener. And by that, he means you are either somebody who meticulously plans every little thing about what you're writing, whether you're a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer or a copywriter or an essayist or a poet, whatever. Like, you outline everything and you plan everything. And before you even write a word and commit something to paper, you were trying to figure out, you know, A to B and B to C and C to F and F to C and so on. What you would probably consider like a type A personality, somebody who really just likes to plan, likes to have somebody like this might have a calendar full of itinerary and they keep a to-do list or a bullet journal or whatever. And on the flip side, you have like a gardener. You have somebody who, you know, isn't, not to say that they don't plan, not to say that they don't think about it, but has more of this kind of fly by the seat of your pants attitude about things, where you just kind of, you're throwing seeds out, you're seeing what happens. You know, you toss a handful, you water it, maybe it grows, maybe it doesn't. Does it grow? Whoa, that became a huge idea. Who knew? I wasn't planning for that. And Martin describes himself as a gardener, which is funny whenever you think about it, considering how big and sprawling and interconnected the Game of Thrones universe is. You know, like, it's hard to imagine somebody having all of these interconnected stories in this massive world that isn't planning it out meticulously. And it's not that he doesn't. He says he does, but his reasoning largely for it is like, I don't like the idea of having an outline, because it feels like I'm kind of half-assed writing the story ahead of time, you know, and by the time it comes to actually writing the story, I feel like I've already experienced it and I'm bored at that point. And so he likes to kind of exist in the chaos of discovering, you know, seeing what happens, seeing what the story becomes without it having to kind of slot within these boundaries. And the reason that I've been thinking about it is because, you know, I personally would identify myself as a gardener. I mean, that's just kind of my personality in general. You know, I'm a person, you know, talking about this shelving behind me. You know, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I've had some shelving in my office before. It's nice. I like it. I like the way that my office was laid out, but pretty early on, I noticed a lot of limitations. And part of that was because I didn't build the shelving with anything in mind. Like, I knew I wanted to put books on it. I knew, like, I don't know, there were gonna be a couple of levels to the shelves. But outside of that, it was just, I need a space to put things on the shelf. And I ran into roadblocks where I was like, you know, because I made this shelf, you know, this height, I can't stand books straight up. Or, you know, I built this section kind of around this thing, but then I got rid of this thing. And now all of a sudden there's this massive section that just doesn't really fit anything anymore. And it doesn't really make sense to have. And so tearing it down and starting over, you know, I had very much the intention of like, I'm going to build this with a reason in mind. I'm going to build it to house certain things. And to some extent, like, you have that right over here. You might see it. I have a small little CRT TV. The plan is to have like a little retro gaming setup over here. I wanted a space where I could do that. I wanted to have an area where that was possible, and I didn't have it before. And so in some cases, I am making that happen. I'm making it work. But in other cases, and I promise I'm getting to a point here, for the most part, have not 100% planned any of this. Because anytime that I would sit down and start drawing out diagrams of what I need to do, and here's the materials I need to get, and here are the cuts that I need to make, and whatever, I would do that, and then I'd be like, I don't know. I think I get the gist. Let's just go. Let's do it. Let's move on and just see what happens. And, you know, the plus side of that is it has allowed me to be flexible, you know, and not get too bent out of shape if I'm, you know, end up kind of miscutting a piece or whatever. But on the downside, you know, I've had to make a couple of trips to Lowe's more than I probably would have, you know, because I forgot this thing or didn't account for this thing or needed more materials, whatever. And that largely is kind of how I approach writing as well. Like I do legitimately try to have a plan. I try to go into it with some sort of idea in mind where it's like, you know, the novel that I'm working on right now, I have a loose outline for. I don't have a chapter by chapter breakdown. I don't have a full character list, but I do have ideas in there of like themes, areas, like chapter outline, like overviews, summaries, if you will, just to kind of like give me a rough idea of what I'm hoping to happen in this section or this act or, you know, whatever it is. And it's helpful. It's helpful to be able to look back, but legitimately, if I were going through and I was trying to plot out every single little thing along the way, it would make me personally just kind of stressed. It would make me feel like I had to fit within this box, that I was constrained to making these specific decisions, or else I'd have to go and I'd have to update the outline, you know, whatever. And so the point is, it comes up a lot whenever I'm thinking about it. Like, am I doing it wrong? You know, because I think this way, because I operate this way, because I, you know, try to create things this way, am I wrong? Could I be doing it better? And the short answer to that is yes, I could be doing it better. And in some cases, I am wrong. But the longer answer is yes, but no. Because as a creative person, you come to things with a very unique personality, viewpoints, perspective, you know, whatever. Like, you're very unique in the way that you tackle specific things, and to try and be something that you're not, to try to adapt that in a way that makes you feel like significantly uneasy, that halts the work and makes it so it doesn't even happen in the first place, like, that isn't helpful. That isn't making you a better writer. That's stopping you from being a writer in the first place. It also doesn't mean that you can't do things better. For me, like, it doesn't mean that I can't be more organized, that I can't try to plan a little bit better so that I don't have to go back and fix redundancies and I have to do all of this other cleanup stuff that's just wasting time in the back end. And the truth is, like, every writer, every person is a mix of all of the things. It's just like, to what degree, how much of this thing did you pour in here as opposed to that thing, whatever, you know. And it reminds me of the place that I work. One of the first things that they do whenever you get hired on is take this Clifton Strengths assessment test. You know, and if you've taken like Myers-Briggs or, you know, some of these, you kind of get the concept of it. But one of the things that Clifton Strengths, it's a Gallup personality assessment thing. One of the things that I feel like it does really well is that it categorizes everything as a strength. Even your lowest, you know, there are 30 something different categories, attributes, whatever. Even your lowest one is considered a strength. It's just your lowest strength. And so the setup in it is saying like, hey, we're not trying to lean into your strengths and exile your weaknesses. We're just acknowledging like, hey, this is the stuff that you're better at. You are potentially really good at some of the stuff that's on the bottom, but you're not as good at that stuff as often. And so maybe it's a good idea for you to lean into this stuff that's a little bit higher up the page. And I think, especially as a creative, like that's a good way of thinking about your work. Is like, artists, my past as an artist, learning art, trying out different mediums and doing different things, whether it was like working with pastels and working with charcoals and working with pencil and digital art, whatever. Like, there was stuff I liked, there was stuff I didn't like, there was stuff that came more natural to me, stuff that I never clicked with. And it doesn't mean that you can't use those things or do those things or add those things into your work. It just means you have to be more aware of how you think about them. In relation to this metaphor, Brandon Sanderson, also well-known fantasy author, you might know him if you read, finished up some of the books on the Wheel of Time series that Robert Jordan started way back, has his own multiple series, notably the Stormlight Archive, big old massive books. But he acknowledged like, hey, I'm a mix of both. I like to plan enough to where, I kind of know where the story's going, but I like to leave enough gray area that I can discover it along the way. And that's a way that works for him. Just like Martin has his own way that works for him, and other people who are maybe more meticulous have ways that work for them. But if you're a writer or creative or, if you're trying to get started or you're trying to find the motivation to work, the goal shouldn't be to work within systems that don't make sense to you, that don't work for you. There's always time to improve. There's always going to be an opportunity for you to take a step back and reevaluate the way that you create and do things differently. But right now, the goal should just be to do the thing. And if you write better flying by the seat of your pants, just going, just balling, then like do it. That's going to be the thing that gets it done. That's going to get you going. If you need to sit down and you need to write, and it's not procrastination, it's actually you're getting in there and you're really kind of wrapping your head around this behemoth of a project, do that. Prepare yourself, get in that position. But the ultimate goal, regardless of what you're trying to do, should be to figure out what works for you and strengthen the areas that you're weak. And realistically, as long as you're showing up, to continue the metaphor along, whether you're pouring concrete, drawing blueprints, or you're just, yeeting seeds out into a field, as long as you're doing it, doesn't really matter. You just need to keep doing your thing and the rest will click into place.